There's a study that showed that 97% of women are uncomfortable in their body. Yeah, of course, we want to look good, but we want to have a better quality of life. People will tell me, I'm not flexible enough to do yoga. And I'm like, actually, yoga helps you become more flexible. We're not here to live in a bubble. We're here to create community. We're here to connect. The fruit from the tree is not for the tree, it's for the ecosystem.
What would you say to the woman listening who feels overwhelmed, disconnected, or has lost sight of herself in the busyness of life?
I would say,
At Conversations Beyond the Brand, we explore the real stories behind the people doing transformational work. And Cash is one of them. Her brand, Moments of Motivation, is more than workouts and affirmations. It's a lifestyle and a space for women to feel seen, supported, and strong. As someone who has benefited directly from her coaching and training, I can tell you her work is changing lives because it's changed mine. Cash, welcome to the
oh, what
podcast.
a
I'm so
such a
excited.
warm welcome. Oh my gosh, who is that?
I am so excited to have you. I could literally cry tears of joy.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Like, I think what you're doing, your work, your mission is going to be so impactful to so many women, and it's just going to have such an awesome ripple effect. So I'm just honored to be in the number and to be a part of this greatness that's unfolding.
Aw, thank you for being a part of my tribe. You've been such a big part of my journey, and I'm happy to introduce you to my audience. For those who may not know you, share a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how moments of motivation came to life.
Yeah, so I guess I will do my best to give you the short of it, but not too short and not too long. So I started my wellness journey in college, 2011. I was very overweight for most of my life growing up. And I went to college and I started working out, started going to like the on campus gym. And I had probably been working out for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then I got sick. And when I got sick, I had lost like 10 pounds. And I had already kind of been working out, but I think those two combined, I went to church a couple Sundays after. People were like, "Oh, you look like you're losing weight." And I was like, "Well, if I look like I'm losing weight, I ain't trying to gain it back." And so that was really what kind of started my journey. And I started off very slow. I started off by doing 15 minutes on the treadmill. I would walk for 5 minutes, I would jog for 5 minutes, and then I would walk for another 5 minutes. And I would do that 2 to 3 times a week. And that was really like my foundation. I always like to say my wellness journey was definitely a marathon and not a sprint because everything happened in stages. So I started working out, got consistent working out, and then probably 2 years into the journey, I started to just notice my nutrition. I really didn't make major changes until I started going to like a small kind of boutique group fitness type gym. And I learned a lot about nutrition. And that's when I started doing changed my eating habits. I started doing bodybuilding competitions and I really kind of got like a bit obsessive, if I'm being honest, about my weight and my body. um and then from there, the passion kind of just continued to grow and I wanted to help other people, so I started working at this boutique gym. And it was great. I learned a lot, but it became toxic. And so my coworker at the time, who then became my business partner, we left, and one of the clients, or 30% of his clients, canceled their membership to follow us. And then one of those clients was like, I see something in you guys. I want to invest in you guys. And she actually gave us the money to, loaned us the money to open up our studio. And that was from 2016 to 2020. And we worked with hundreds of men, women, children, all body types, all backgrounds, all ages, all fitness levels. And I really was able to learn the science of what works. And not to be cookie cutter, because there's going to be certain nuances for different bodies. But it really gave me the opportunity to learn a lot about the body. Um, at the end of 2020, we made the decision to move everything virtually. And that's where the Moments of Motivation was born. So It really started off as my affirmation cards, because I realized through my own journey that all the weight that I had lost this weight, but my mind was still this overweight woman who I no longer was. And it took a lot of mental work for me to break down that image I had of myself. And that's kind of where the mindset piece came in. And I'm also a yogi. And that self-awareness, I realized was so key. It's like you can lose the weight, you can work out all day, you can eat all the right foods, but if you're still hating yourself, if you're still
Mm.
speaking negatively to yourself, you'll never feel like you've arrived, even though you've been there for years. And so that is kind of I guess the second or the third part of the journey is really getting that mindset together. And so now I work with women online doing nutrition coaching. I see a few clients in person doing personal training, and then I teach yoga weekly, and I have my online community where I teach as well. So I know that's a lot. I tried to condense it, probably skipped over some pieces,
Right.
but that's essentially, how we are where we are.
I love it. And something I noticed because you and I have been friends for quite some time, like we're friends in real life,
Yes,
and
very much so.
look, my marketing hat comes on. It's like you have a tendency to kind of glaze over how much weight you lost in your personal journey. And I think for me, especially as someone who's, been overweight all of my adult life, one of the things that compelled me to want to work with you is like, oh, you know what it's like.
Hmm.
So tell the people in the back how much weight you lost on your journey.
So I lost 75 pounds between, I guess, like the first, it's really hard to say a time frame, right? Because it really
Well, the
wasn't
time
like
frame
all.
doesn't matter. I don't care if it took you 10 years to lose 75 pounds. As a woman, we think and we know that it's typically harder for women to lose weight.
Mhm.
Um, that's like a lot. And I think a lot of women will resonate with you having been through it, like, you know how difficult it is. You know that, the mind over matter and how that mindset piece comes in to everything. So, one of the things I want to ask you, you gave us a really good some really good groundwork of like who you are, what you do, and your why. But as you have transitioned from the studio to virtual and now being, um, your whole own brand, honey, what has inspired you to work with women specifically and help women in this wellness space?
I think working with women specifically, and then even taking it a step further, working with moms specifically,
Mhm.
um, in becoming a mom, in having my son. So my son is 2. I gave birth January of 23. Obviously, we can all do math here. My
The
fitness
tank
journey.
child. Well, some of us think, but go ahead.
My wellness completely was flipped on top of its head because, at that point in the game, I had kind of lost all the weight, and mentally I knew that I would gain the weight back, but I think the circumstances, the lack of sleep, and um you can have all the support in the world, but it's still hard, even as somebody who's got a stable home environment, it's still challenging. And I think, as moms, we juggle so many things where, some of us are moms, wives, sisters, daughters, business owners, some could be working full time, and there's a lot of things to juggle. And I think my passion for working with women and then taking a step further with moms is because there's so many things that come into play. Our hormones come into play, our emotions come into play, our mood comes into play, and on top of that, we tend to always put ourselves last. We're always putting the needs of everybody else first and saying we'll put ourselves on the back burner. And so a lot of the women that work with me, some of them are younger moms, but then some of them are moms whose kids have grown up and now they're like, now it's time for me. And so I'm really passionate about helping young moms, new moms, as well as seasoned moms, because no matter where we fall in the mix up, we're still learning how to prioritize the self, still learning how to pour back into ourselves. And I think as women, when we feel good about ourselves, when we're prioritizing our self care, when we're prioritizing our health and wellness, we show up better. We show up differently. And it's really funny that you asked this question because I think that for women, a lot of women, I know for me, taking up space is something that I've always struggled with. And I think that prioritizing your wellness lets you take up space. I was at the gym earlier today before we got on this call, and this guy, like, I had already had my little area, and this guy just came out of nowhere, and he's like, I mean, he's like right on me. If I move too much, I'm gonna hit him. And it just made me think, like, such a typical man. Men are so unaware, they don't even care. They're just doing what they want to do. They're very, and not all men, not to
Yeah, no,
generalize.
yeah, we're not
Um,
generalizing.
not yeah, we're not generalizing here, but a lot of men are very comfortable in who they are and taking up space and speaking up for themselves and making time for themselves. And so I think giving that power back to women, and watching that transformation happen, watching that shift happen, and really watching that self love come back in is what lights me up. I love it's like weight loss, that's great. But when clients tell me, what, I was able to come off my medication, or, I was able to lift a certain thing that I wasn't able to lift before, or, my back is not hurting, my shoulders, like those are the wins that I love because now it's impacting your life,
Yeah,
and that's the whole reason we do this is, yeah, of course we want to look good, but we want to have a better quality of life. We get one vehicle. And
right,
so I think helping women to get to that point where they are able to prioritize themselves, able to take up space for themselves, but then also able to love themselves.
right.
And not to get off too much on a tangent, but I mean, this was probably a decade ago, so my numbers may be dated, but there's a study that showed that 97% of women are uncomfortable in their body. 97%
Mhm.
of women.
I believe it.
And we can look at other women and be like, "Man, she's got the perfect body," but that same woman is uncomfortable in her body. And so my goal is to be able to help. Let's bring that number down. Even if we can get to 96%,
Right.
if we can make that dent, we pass the torch on to the next person who makes it 95. Um, so yeah, hope that answers the question. I
It
know I
does.
feel like I
You
went around
answered
the
that
world to
one.
get there.
You answered that one and some others too, because, one of the things that you really said that stood out to me is like giving women permission to take up space. And our work is very different. But literally, I find myself doing the same thing in my business, right? Like giving women permission to beat on their chest and say how wonderful they are and to brand and market themselves effectively. Because to your point, and it's something I say all the time too, our male counterparts are not worried about is my chin right? Does my hair, I was on with you before, like, is my hair it you know, they don't do that, and we're not knocking men, we love them. Married to one, okay?
Yes.
Um, but they have a different, just a different way of being and taking up space in the world that we don't. Whether it's, it's so interesting. My mind's like, woo hoo hoo, when you made that correlation, like about taking up space and even in the gym or taking up the space to say, hey, this 30 minutes is for me to work out. This 45 minutes is for me to work out. When you and I were working out together, my husband would have to lose on duty those mornings, right? And so
Mhm.
many women aren't even comfortable having that conversation. Not that they don't even have supportive spouses, but we don't even ask. We
Right.
think we have to do everything. So I love that you really shined a light on that. Um,
Mm.
so one of the things that I also want to ask you about, you kind of alluded to it in your previous question. You really alluded to it, but maybe you'll tell me some different ones. What are the mindset blocks that you think that women really face when it refers to beginning their wellness journeys and really focusing on themselves?
It's a great question. I think mindset blocks are one, accessibility. I think a lot of people don't even start because it's like this huge mountain, and this belief of I can't even climb that mountain anyway, so what's the point of even trying?
Mm,
Um, and a example that always comes to mind is, like, as a yogi, a lot of my um, students in class are first timers,
mhm,
and people will tell me, "I'm not flexible enough to do yoga." And I'm like, "Actually, yoga helps you become more flexible." And I think that same mindset is the mindset block that I see with a lot of people is just this lack of belief that it's
mhm,
possible for them. And I think starting off small, it's like, of course, you start off, it's going to be hard, but doing whatever you can and realizing that it's a little bit more accessible than you think. Go outside and walk 2 minutes. And I think the biggest mindset block is believing that either I don't have enough time to work out, or I'm not strong enough to work out, or I don't know what to do to work out. I think those three are the biggest blocks that stop people from starting. I think once people start, the issue becomes performing the exercises properly. So injury is huge. You're not performing. If people aren't performing the exercises properly, it increases the risk of injury, and that increased risk of injury means that you have to sit out.
Yeah.
And once you sit out, that stops it. And then it's like, well, I started working out, but then I got injured, so I stopped, and then I don't go back. And I think that block is what kind of messes with people. And then the third block, not to go so deep, but different stages have different blocks. I think the third block is feeling restricted.
Mhm.
Once you get to a certain point on the journey and you are consistent, you're seeing the result, then you get to a point where you feel restricted, and it's like, well, forget it. If this is what it takes and I don't want to do all this, so I'm going to let this go. It feels like it's not worth it. And I think it's realizing the nuance of finding balance. And so I feel like there are several roadblocks and obstacles that come up along the wellness journey. And I think it's all about reframing.
Yeah.
I love to kind of give the analogy of like it's up and down for sure. It's like you're going to have high points in your journey, but then you're going to have low points. But even in your low points, the fact that you're on the journey, you're still farther along than where you started. And I feel like the mindset of, yes, I fell off the wagon, but you know what, I was on the wagon.
Right.
Right, let's focus
Right.
on the fact that you was on the wagon to begin with.
You're
And
trying
because
and
you were
you're here.
on, yeah, because you were on once, you can get back on. And so I think the willingness to try again, and sometimes it's just somebody affirming that in you, like, hey, you can try again. And I feel like a lot of my work revolves around helping people make a perspective shift. You can go anywhere to get a workout program, get nutrition, even get a meditation and mindset. But I think really talking through the roadblocks and saying, well, let's look at it this way is really where the work happens.
Right. And I think too the correlation between um the physical and the mental and emotional, right? Um that's really, really important. What has helped you stay grounded in your own health and wellness journey as you're serving others? Because I know you're still a relatively new mom. My daughter's 8, so I think I'm an OG, but I'm not.
No.
But you recently had a baby, and I know as someone who's incredibly fit, you know, getting your pre-baby body back, how have you stayed grounded in your own journey as you support others?
I will say, you know what? Just like that roller coaster, I don't want to say I've always been grounded in the
Yeah,
last 2 years. I have been
that's
unhinged at
real.
moments in the last 2 years. I think it's getting back on, and it's funny that you asked this question, but I really believe that community is
Mhm.
the key, because I look back over my own journey and it's like, why was I able to keep the weight off? It's absolutely because community. I think being surrounded by other people with the same goal for so long, it just becomes ingrained in you. And I think that's a key piece of the wellness journey that it's easy to miss because you think it's just you, and it is just you. Nobody can eat for you, nobody can work out for you, nobody can do all the things for you.
Mhm.
But there's a certain synchronicity that happens when you're around people who have a similar objective. And so I think plugging into community, and for me, because it's my work, my community becomes my clients,
Right.
becomes the community that I'm building of women. um, but I think that aside from that community, I really think that just personally, I love movement. I love working out, is enjoyable to me, it's stress relief for me. And so I think it's not as much as the working out as it is the food. And I feel
Yeah.
like for me, and recently, this is like within the last probably 4 to 6 weeks, logging my food
Yeah.
um, has been what has kept me grounded. Of course, the community first, having my community, being plugged into with my clients and with each other. But I think a second step for that, um, is logging my food, and then community kind of in a silent way holds me accountable to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, and it's hard, I don't feel like I've always been perfect on this postpartum journey. There have been times where I'm eating muffins and I'm eating cookies and then I'm having pasta and I'm eating all the things days in a row. What I tell my clients
But
not
that's
to
real though, we're
do.
all human, right?
Yeah. And I feel it. So it's like I can't say that it's been perfect, but I will say that I reach a certain point and I'm like, okay, I got to do better. I have to clean this up. We've got to kind of reel it back in. And so I definitely say it's the community. Um, it's the community that really kind of helps for me to always come back. And that's what I would say to anybody wanting to start off small with your routine as far as nutrition, water, movement, and mindset, but find a community, an online community, an in-person community, but find a community and really be active in it because the more active you are, the more that you get out. And so that's kind of where I'm heading within my community is this accountability and rewarding people for staying accountable, just
Right,
sharing your journey. And that's kind of my I guess my mental strategy to help
right,
clients is, hey, take a picture of your water, you take the most pictures and you'll get a prize.
right.
um, and so that's kind of something simple, but just those small reinforcing the habits. And again, coming back to community, community, community.
Yeah, and I wanna talk about your community, so, but give me just a second because one of the things that I wanna acknowledge and, like, hold space for is that you are a really phenomenal businesswoman and,
Hmm.
marketer within your own right, and you create some really amazing content that always feels honest and real. Yeah, I
Aw.
think look, because that's who you are.
Aw.
But it's always full of heart and compassion because I think
Mm.
that's sometimes missing from this space. People think that you can just will your way to a healthy body and, don't do this, don't do the shots, don't do this, don't do that, willpower. Well, child, but speaking of your content, because it is so amazing, and if you have not checked out Cash's content, we will tell you all the places to find her at the end.
Aw.
But what is your creative process for like sharing online?
My creative process for sharing online. It's so funny that you ask because I think I'm cleaning up my my act when it comes to sharing. Um, but I really find inspiration from other people a lot of times. And thank you so much. What an honor. That's such a high compliment for you to say that my content feels real because that's what I love to watch. I love to watch people whose lives don't look perfect, who are okay with kind of showing the pretty and the not so pretty. Um, but I think my creative strategy kind of revolves around my method for wellness, which is the menu movement mindset method. And so it's all about your menu. What are you eating? Your movement. How are you moving your body? And your mindset. Where is your mind as you're doing all these things? And so when I share online, the mindset is really like, how can I showcase a piece of each parts of this methodology? Um, and even taking it a step further, something that I've been very mindful of with my page is when people first come to my page, my cover images, I want people to be inspired or to feel better just having looked at my page. And so you'll kind of see some of the cover images. It's like, it's working, keep going, or the observer effect. It's almost like I'm wanting to kind of just drop seeds in people's subconscious that might trigger something down the road. And so I'm really just doing my best to become more intentional. So I know I'm not giving you a straight answer because
No,
I'm
you
kind of
are.
still figuring out my creative process
Aren't we all?
as I
And
go
it's ever
along.
evolving,
Yes.
it's ever evolving, and that's a phenomenal answer. And along
Yeah.
those lines, I wanna talk about moments of motivation. Cash has wellness cards, excuse me, affirmations cards, journals, all the things to really address that mindset piece and really pour into you. And I wanna talk about the brand of moments of motivation and what it really means to you and how you want
Mhm.
women to experience it.
Hmm. So moments of motivation is so it's so funny because motivation is waning, and so a lot of people will say, I'm not motivated, I'm not motivated, I'm not motivated. And really, motivation is something that is fleeting. It's something that you have and then it goes because we're humans and that's just a part of the human experience. And so, really, like, I invite you in with motivation, but I keep you with discipline and building habits. And
Mhm.
so, the Moments of Motivation Collective is really, you feel motivated when you come in, it's exciting, but once you're in, I want you to have the habits so you no longer have to rely on feeling motivated. You rely on this pull because it's in
Mhm.
you. It's like when you brush your teeth in the morning, nobody has to motivate you to brush your teeth. It's just a part of what you do.
Right.
And so with the Moments of Motivation Collective, I do want people to feel motivated. People tell me, I help to motivate them, which is great. But at a certain point, that motivation will wane. And what keeps you is your habits. And so when people come into the collective, I want them to feel welcome. I want them to feel warm. I want them to feel like, wow, I can really do this. It's for me, it's about breaking it down into its most bite-sized piece that fits you where you're at. Because anybody can start from any point. Like my mom will be 77 this year. And I'm like, there's no excuse, mom. You can literally go on YouTube and type walking in place, because she's like, I don't want to walk outside. I'm afraid of the dog. That's fine. You don't have to go outside. You can put on YouTube and walk in place. And you can do that for 2 minutes,
Right.
but it's all about the habit. And I think people overlook how much of an impact the small things have on the greater whole because going through the motions, is just ingraining that habit. It's just creating that ritual, that routine, that pattern, if you will, of I do this thing for my body day in, day out,
Mm.
you know.
I think that's
Uh,
so powerful that you said, the 2 minutes, the 5 minutes. I know you used to tell me, "Just get on the bike for 5 minutes." Um, because I think that especially a personality like mine, I'm very much all or nothing, and people feel like if they can't do a 30, 45-minute workout, then I'll just do nothing, and then you look up and you 2, 3, 4 weeks without doing nothing when you could have done, some stretches, a couple yoga poses or something.
yeah.
I think that's really, really important, and I really love that you said, you start with the motivation and then you lean into the habit. That's super powerful. What is something that surprised you? You've been a business owner for a long time now. How many years has it been? Almost a decade. Or has it
Almost a
been a decade?
decade. Almost a decade. It will be a decade in 2016. So Body and
Okay.
Life, my studio opened May of 2016. So
Oh,
just
wow.
under a year or
Okay.
a decade.
Okay, cool. So what is something that has surprised you about building a brand that's deeply connected to your own life? Because all of this work is like so much of who you are. And, your own journey has led you here. What has that process of building your brand been like?
Hard.
Mm.
In a word, hard. Um, what has surprised me about it is I think I think it's the times, and not to bring in outside influences, but we do live in a very volatile time, it seems like. And I think being willing to be flexible with the climate, because what the climate looked like when my business started in 2016 is completely different from what it looks like now in 2025. And the way people spend their dollars is totally different now than
Yeah,
in 2020, even. 2020 was totally different as far as how people spent versus now in 2025. And so I think what's surprising, or I guess now a decade in, that I can anticipate is the fluctuations that will happen. There will
right,
be fluctuations in your business. There will be shifts that have to happen. There will be the need to adjust to the cycle of what's going on around. And that's not to say that the climate controls your business, but if it's
you
raining
have to
outside, you're going to
adjust.
go out with an umbrella. You're not going to
Absolutely.
go out without an umbrella. And so I think kind of that is what has surprised me and that's what I've learned over the years is being willing to adjust. No, I'm not going to stay inside because it's raining, but I am going to go outside with my umbrella.
I love
um,
that.
because I want to adjust to the climate, to the times, to whatever the call is in that moment, while still being authentic to who I am and what I want to put out in the world.
I love it. I love that. And it's so true. I've been in business for 18 years, and what business looks like today was not business in 2007, was not business in 2017, was not business in 2021. Like, we're really having to adjust as, life is happening and the world is making all these tremendous shifts. Um, Yeah, but I think the thing that at the core of the branding is like, I look at our brand as like that's our personality, right? Our business
Mhm.
personality, and so much of that is deeply rooted. Like you have such a deeply
Mhm.
rooted purpose and
Mm.
passion. So, um, I want to wrap us up here shortly, but I have a couple final questions.
Yes, I'm loving this. This has been so good, and I'm honestly gaining clarity just from this conversation on who I am and what I do. So
Well, praise God.
this is beneficial for you, or this is beneficial for me, as it
Right. Yeah.
hopefully has been for you.
Yeah, and I know that our audience will really appreciate what you've shared and your vulnerability and um, the wisdom that you've shared
Mm.
about how we can really take a look at our own wellness and approach it. But now, Cash, this is your time to shine. What would you say to the woman listening who feels overwhelmed, disconnected, or has lost sight of herself in the busyness of life?
I would say you are not alone. That one, you are not alone, and two, help is so much closer than you think. Um, I think being willing to vocalize the support that you need, even if it's outside of just wellness, but I think vocalizing what you need, you never know who can help you and how they can help you. And so I think kind of going back to that community is tap into your community. If you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like you can't make it, if you're feeling like you're not going to do another day, tap into community, tap into, if you're a believer, tap into your connection to God. If you're spiritual, tap into your connection with the higher power. Um, but I think that community, realizing that help is closer than you think, and sometimes it's just a matter of speaking up and learning how to vocalize what you need. And for those people who struggle to vocalize what they need, I'd say write it down. Sometimes it's just journaling, and a lot of times if I can't journal, I will do a voice note and
Yep.
I'll just talk it out on a voice note. Um, so I think the first step is to find help, vocalize your needs, whether it's your best friend, a close friend, a therapist, a wellness coach.
Right.
Um, Seek help and get out of your own head. I think um, one thing that the pandemic for me really revealed is how crucial it is for us to be in community. We were not
Mhm.
placed on this earth to be alone, to be
I
in a
meant to be
bubble, to
alone.
live
Mhm.
in this, solitude. We were actually meant to help each other. Even the gifts that we've been blessed with, these gifts are to serve others. They're not to serve ourselves. Like I heard
Yeah,
this beautiful quote that has always stuck with me is that the fruit from the tree is not for the tree, it's for the ecosystem. And I'm like, wow,
there
the
you go.
fruit that we produce is not for us, it's for others. And so I think remembering that we're not here to live in a bubble, we're here to create community, we're here to connect. And a lot of times it's really that connection piece that will help to lift us up out of the hole that we found ourselves in.
Amen. Absolutely. That's a little heavy. I feel that in my spirits. So I wanna
Gotta
lighten
remind
things up just a
myself.
bit before we go. I want you to tell me this a quick lightning round, something really fun,
Okay.
and just say the first thing that comes to mind, okay?
Okay.
Morning person or night owl?
Morning person.
One, wellness buzzword that you which would retire forever.
Toned.
And what is your coffee order?
Coffee order is a medium roast with steamed almond milk, and 2 stevia.
Love it. And one book every woman on a wellness journey should read.
The first book that comes to mind has nothing to do with wellness specifically, but I have to honor what's the first book that came to mind, and that is The Game of Life and How to Play It by Mary Shovel Shin. In
Life
fact,
changing, y'all.
I have it right here.
She
As a
bought that
matter of
book for
fact,
me.
this is one of the best books I have read. Um, and it happens to be written by a woman also, but I
Yeah,
think it's just mindset. I think for me in my wellness, menu of course, movement of course, but mindset is kind of like the foundation that allows you to be able to eat the right foods and to move how you need to move. And so this book deals heavily on the mindset, and I think it just helped for me to unlock several mental shifts. And I'm constantly recommending it wherever I go.
I love that. I love it. Cash,
Mhm.
thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today. Thank you for your heart, your wisdom, and everything that you bring to the world and constantly pour into others, including myself.
Mhm.
Y'all, if you're looking for someone who can help you reconnect with your strength and your vulnerability and your softness, Cash is that person. Cash, where can
Mhm.
people find you online?
So it's at Cashe Mawo. If you're watching, you can just type in exactly what you see on the screen. But if you're listening, it's Cashemawo. You can find me as Cashe Mawo on Instagram, on YouTube, on TikTok. I'm not really too active on Facebook, but I'd love for you to join my newsletter. I send tips and I love to give away free things, free resources that can help to support you on your wellness journey.
I love it, and she has an awesome community, and we'll link all the things about
Oh
Cash.
yeah, how can I forget my virtual community?
It's awesome community. I will leave all the things in the show notes. And if this conversation has encouraged you, share it with a sister, share it with a colleague, a friend who needs a reminder that she's worth showing up for. And don't forget to subscribe to Conversations Beyond the Brand for more powerful stories like this one. Until next time, stay rooted, stay bold, and stay in relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you.